From 1960 to 1964, there were millions of TV viewers, and they watched the odyssey of Todd, Buzz, and a Corvette along Route 66. The piano man on that session and so many others is our guest. Ladies and gentlemen, my hero, Mr. Donn Trenner. An absolute pleasure, man. This has been a long time in the making.
I know, I'm older now.
Listen, I got one question it's been dying to ask.
Yeah.
What was Paul Smith really like?
Wonderful. Well, he cares a lot about you, too. What is it you're trying to find out? I'm not sure.
I thought that would be a good opening question.
Paul Smith, in addition to playing wonderful piano, often takes his shoe off and plays with the heel of his shoe to be funny.
He does.
He's a huge man. He's about 6'3".
Yeah.
Has incredible chops, and he's very competent.
We're starting the show with Nelson Riddle's theme to Route 66.
Oh, yes.
That tune starts off with you playing that lick.
Uh-huh.
Did you have any idea that tune would be so universally accepted for people to watch some decent television? Did you have any idea the mass appeal of that theme?
No, other than the fact that we did a show. It was a television show called Route 66 that we did every week. And I did that with Nelson. We did the pre-record of the music at a recording studio, and then they inserted it into the TV show. It's cues for dissolves and things in a television show that need tidbits of music.
So as the show is going on, the incidental music you're talking about is also Nelson Riddle's band?
Absolutely. Nelson Riddle's orchestra.
Orchestra?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What makes a band and an orchestra?
An orchestra has strings.
Oh, well, I never knew that.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
It's really a nice piece of music. It really is. It's a classic example of Nelson's very versatile writing. But recently, a bass player that I work with here a lot, who teaches at school, called me and he said, I'm doing an arrangement for the kids in school. He said, I'm taking off a copy from Route 66. And I said, oh, really? I said, you know who's playing piano on that? And he said, no. I said, it's me. And he couldn't believe it. And he burnt me a copy of it, and I have it in the car. I hadn't heard it. I never got a copy of it or anything, which is true of so much of my recording. I never got a lot of stuff that I recorded until people somehow, like you, send it to me or bring it to my attention.
You never bothered collecting any of the stuff that you were on?
I can't say not any of it, but some, No, I didn't.
In going back through some of the history, I had read someplace where you were with Ted Fio Rito. Now, you were with him, according to the information, from 1944 to about 1945.
Correct.
Was that about? But you were in high school.
I graduated from high school in June of 1944. I was unable to go to my graduation ceremony, so my parents picked up my diploma, and I was on my way to South Carolina to work a summer job. And when I came back, I went to New York, and I took my entrance exam at Juilliard, and the same day I was offered a position with the Ted Fio Rito Orchestra. Now, knowing that I was 17, and the draft would be when I'm 18, I chose to start my career. So I joined the Ted Fio Rito band while I was 17. And I was the youngest guy in the band until we got to Jansen Beach, Portland, Oregon. And Ted, the leader, said to me, I'd like you to meet some people. And he took me over, and I knew that there was a trumpet player that was leaving. And Ted introduced me to Dr. and Mrs. Severinsen. And of course, that was Doc Severinsen, who now joined the band, and I was no longer the youngest guy in the band. He was 2 months younger than I.
There was an album that I found recently, and you said it could possibly be the first time you recorded. Do you remember the session where you recorded with the Baron, otherwise known as Charlie Mingus?
Yes.
Did you know during that session that Mingus was going to be the influential bass player 20, 30 years later? Was there any indication of his greatness back then?
Well, there was an indication of other things rather than his greatness. There was an indication that his brain was fried. He was a very strange man.
Back then, too.
Yeah, he really was. In fact, I hope I find it someday. I got a letter from him once when he was traveling, the only correspondence I ever got. And the letter was just filled with brain failure, you know. Yeah, he got kind of violent. He broke a chair over a trumpet player's head one day. And
there was a documentary made on him. It was most disturbing. I don't know if you ever saw that or not.
I didn't.
But I was just wondering if it had taken place way back when you knew him in the 40s.
And I didn't know him that well. He called me, and I went to Los Angeles and did this record date with him.
Yeah.
It was a funny record date, too. We played, I think, an original of his, and the guys in the band had to sing.
Uh-huh.
And the lyrics were, Shababa Udlakleeblo to blue. And we just kept singing it over and over.
That's on here.
Is it?
Yeah.
Well, that's, and then I did one side, I think, with Helen.
Yeah, Helen's on here. They do a standard, you know.
Say It Isn't So.
Say It Isn't So. Yeah. That's right.
Shababa Udlakleeblo to blue.
Tell us about Helen Carr.
I met Helen when I was traveling with Ted Fio Rito. We played a date at the Golden Gate Theater in San Francisco, and it was just when I was 18 years old, and it's where I registered for the draft. I remember that very well. And after the Golden Gate Theater date, we went over to Oakland to do an afternoon dance session for 2 weeks at a place called the Mondre Cafe. And by the time we got there, I had, as guys left the band, I had gotten 5 or 6 guys from my orchestra here on to Ted's band. Mm-hmm. One of them was named Jimmy Hansen. He's a saxophone player, lives in Florida now. He and I met a couple of girls one afternoon at the Mondre Cafe. And we went out, and I can't remember whose car we had, but all I remember is the girl that I was with and the girl that he was with was not the way I wanted it. I wanted the girl that was with him in the back seat, and that was Helen. And somehow we worked it out, and that's how I met her. And sometime later, she came and sang with, when I was in the service, she sang with my band in the service, and we got married.
There was a tune that you did with her on an album, I believe it's called Down in the Depths of the 90th Floor. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Yeah. That tune was one of Cole Porter's lesser known. Did you have an A&R man that insisted that tune be part of the session?
No. The reason we ever did that song was that while I was in St. Louis in the service, Helen got a job at the Chase Hotel, which is a posh hotel in St. Louis, working with the Joe Shermer Trio, who was a wonderful guitarist. And he taught that tune to her. Mm-hmm. And that's how I learned it. And it's a wonderful piece of music because it's like 3 parts. Mm-hmm. That's why it's not very well known, because it's pretty difficult, you know. And I always remembered it, and we did it, and it became the title of the album.
Yes. It's not recorded a lot. Mm-mm. Is it difficult harmonically? Lyrically?
Well, lyrically and harmonically, because it's in segments. It goes into different kind of phases, you know.
Right.
It's really a wonderful piece of music, though.
Manhattan, I'm up a tree. The man that I adored walked out on me.
Tell us about Frankie Randall.
I'm still in touch with him. I did about 4 albums for RCA with him, and we did a 4-week promotional tour with a small group. And I did the tour with him, and we traveled through the country. And he and I became very, very good friends. And I worked with him quite a bit when he was kind of getting hot, you know. He did some wonderful albums.
Which one on this particular, if you just look at the tunes, which one would you prefer us to
Well, they're all good. A Wonderful Day Like Today.
Yeah,
there's some really swinging things in here. Marty Page did a lot of the charts.
Yeah.
Look for the silver lining whenever a cloud appears in the blue. Remember somewhere a sun is shining, and it's the right thing to do is make it shine for you. A heart full of joy and gladness will always banish sadness and strife. So always look for the silver lining and try to find the sunny side of life.
Tell us about Mel Tormé. Some people have told me he's a very difficult person to work with. Is that true?
I didn't have any real problems with him. I can cite an example. It's rather interesting. During my days with Ann-Margret and Roger Smith, I became involved in a disease called myasthenia gravis. And that's unfortunately what Ann-Margret's husband suffers from. And we used to do an annual benefit for myasthenia gravis. And one year, we brought Mel Tormé in. Now, most always, the artist or the guest that was on that show would do it gratis. Mel, I think, wanted $17,000. And his manager, Dale Sheets, called me and he said, Mel wants a cashier's check in his hand before rehearsal. And I said, I'm sorry, forget about it. We don't do it that way. And he said, well, that's what he wants. And I said, well, I'll do what I can to accomplish it. But I said, first of all, he's the only one that's ever charged this charity for that, you know. So we got to rehearsal that day, and I was not playing. It was my orchestra, however. And Mel was up there rehearsing, and he kept looking over at Dale Sheets, who was sitting with me, pointing to his watch, indicating, did you get the check yet? And I told him at the front office, don't give that check to them until the rehearsal's over, you know. So we got through that, you know. So he was a little funny in that way. Also, I remember he had a bass player with him who told me in, I think, 9 years of being with Mel Tormé, he never bought dinner once for the guys.
Oh, my.
But let's go the other way about Mel Tormé. Let's discuss his talent. He was incredible. I mean, incredible talent. A great singer. He played drums quite well. He was sort of a homemade arranger, but did quite well. He was a remarkable talent.
You've said goodbye, your eyes are dry. I know if I should start to cry, I'd cry.
How long have you been recording now? How long have you been in the music business?
I had an orchestra when I was 15 or 16 years old. We did a tour that I put together, a USO tour when I was 16 years old. I have pictures of me with my orchestra on stage at the Whitney Theater and the Strand Theater with a big band.
Well, tell me about the USO end of it. Did you go overseas?
No.
So you were playing at various locations?
The only USO things I did were with Bob Hope, the Christmas tours. I did 7 of those.
How could we forget your association with Les Brown and Bob Hope?
Yeah, a long time.
You went overseas on some of those war tours, right?
Christmas tours. Every Christmas, Bob went. We would leave on December 16th from Burbank and come back around December 28th and do all of our Christmas shopping in the post exchanges.
Were they military aircraft that
Oh,
you
sure.
flew?
MATS. Military Air Transport Service.
In what countries did you go?
Went to Korea, went to Japan, Greenland, North Africa, Spain, Germany, Italy. We did a show from an aircraft carrier in the Bay of Naples.
Mm-hmm. Tell us a story about you and Bob Hope walking down the street.
Oh, the one when he called me to go up to
the police station.
It was Boise, Idaho. That was it.
Okay.
So we boarded the plane or whatever. I can't remember when we went up and checked into the hotel. And we did the show the next day, I think. But he called me in my room and he said, I feel like taking a walk. You want to take a walk with me? And I said, sure. So it was late at night, probably 9:30 or 10, dark outside. And we walked in whatever area we were in. And the police stations years ago used to have like a little green ball that hung outside that said police on it, you know. So we saw that, and Bob says, let's go in and say hello to the guys. So we did, and they almost lost it, man. I mean, can you imagine that?
Was he like that? Was he the type of guy who would do that
he would
a
do
lot?
stuff like that. And it certainly did that night, you know.
That must have been pretty good.
Oh,
Those guys must have
they were just blown away. Bob Hope walking in.
Hurry, hurry, hurry. Take the 8 train to find
the quickest way to get to Harlem. If you should take the A train, you'll find you'll get where you're going if you'll hurry.
Betty Roche.
Oh, yeah.
When was that relationship?
That's going to be hard for me to pinpoint a date. I did it in New York with her. I think the album was called Take the A Train, was it?
Yes,
yeah.
it was. Yeah.
Yeah, she had a big hit with Duke Ellington singing Take the A Train. And Bethlehem Records that I was associated with.
Were you an employee of Bethlehem Records?
No, only when they hired me to do some stuff, you know.
There was a lot of good noise that came out of Bethlehem Records.
Oh, yes. Red Clyde was the A&R man, very well known. Yeah, and a lot of good artists. Johnny Hartman, Mel Tormé did some stuff.
Yeah. Did you work with Johnny Hartman at all?
Yes. On a couple of I don't think I recorded with him, but I did a couple of television shows that he was on. That he guested on.
Would you consider him more of a crooner than a jazz singer?
Oh, yeah, definitely. He was like Al Hibbler in a way, you know, a real romantic ballad singer.
Yeah, like the guy who replaced Sinatra with Tommy Dorsey's...
Dick Haymes?
Dick Haymes.
Oh, yes, of course.
You worked with Dick Haymes, right?
A whole lot. Oh, absolutely.
What was that like?
Very interesting man. You know, he had a very interesting, convoluted life with ladies. He was married to Rita Hayworth, and he had a pretty serious alcohol problem, which he tried to correct. And he went to Europe and stayed over in Europe for a long while, and then he came back. And I did an album with him at the Coconut Grove, which I did all the work on the album, and we recorded it with the Les Brown Orchestra. Did you know anything about me with Rod McKuen?
You were Rod McKuen's musical director?
Yes.
And what did that require you to do?
Play piano and conduct.
Did you do the charts for him as well? Who was the arranger?
A group of people I can't even remember.
So was it a situation where Rod McKuen would present himself to the center of the stage and read his poetry, and you guys would be playing some incidental music?
Well, he wrote a lot of songs, and he would sing the songs. And then he would do something that was rather interesting. He loved to be on stage. So after the performance was over, he invited everybody to stay, and he'd go sit on the apron of the stage and just answer questions from people. And because he had an enormous fan club.
Yeah, was he like the poet laureate for a while or something like that?
They called him the America's poet, you know.
Yeah. Nancy Wilson.
Your lips were like a red and ruby chalice, warmer than a summer night. The clouds were like an alabaster palace, rising to a snowy height.
You were her music director at one time, right?
Yeah, for like 6 or 7 years. I traveled all over Europe with her. That's how I met all my European friends.
The album where she sings Midnight Sun, the album where they finally put your name on the liner notes. I don't know if you're aware of that.
No.
This project came out.
Oh, the Lush Life album.
Yes, the Lush Life album. Did you play Celeste on here?
Yes.
There's a lot of you on this recording then.
Yeah.
Okay, because it doesn't say on here that you're playing Celeste. It says you're on here with piano.
She was here at this house with her trio maybe 4 or 5 years ago for Thanksgiving. Yeah.
Wow. What tune should we play out of that album?
Everything on here is great. Midnight Sun.
Midnight Sun, for you, babe.
Okay, great.
And the stars forget to shine. bright sun.
Tell us about Ben Webster in that session. I mean, that seems kind of unusual, doesn't it?
I think that was also a Bethlehem.
Yes, it is. It is a Bethlehem. Do you remember this session?
I remember the session very well, but I never spent a lot of time with him except for that session.
What was it like being in the session with him? Were you guys kidding around, or was it just down to business?
Well, I'm sure it was loose at times, but it was down to business because producers are paying for musicians at a rate of whatever the rate is per 3 hours and record 4 tunes.
How did Don Trenner get the gig?
They called me. So from Bethlehem, somebody called me.
Were they up to the T's?
I don't know.
Sue Raney.
Dear Sue Raney.
You've been doing a lot of recording with her over the years,
she's
huh?
wonderful. She's a great singer.
What is the attraction? What makes it work between you and Sue Raney?
She's just very musical and very good and has great ears and is a great improviser and a lovely, lovely lady. Gosh, you're really testing my memory. I met her because I got a call from the 4 freshmen to work a date in San Diego and play Hammond B3. At which point I said, I'm not a Hammond B3 player, but I can get by for whatever, I'm not a proficient organist. Mm-hmm. And I went down and did the date, and she was the opening act, and that's where I met her.
And you guys have been friends a long time?
Ever since.
Oh, I love hearing stories like that.
I love the East, I love the West, and North and South, they're both the best. I only go there as a guest, 'cause I love being here with you. I love the sea, I love the shore, the handlery, and what is more.
You got to tell us about Harry Scholar, which is a new venture for you.
Yeah.
Well, tell us what went into that project. I know you had to go across the country to get musicians.
Well, it came about as a result of the album I did with Paul Broadnax, which was called Here's to Joe. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
He heard that album, and he heard us do the CD release party at Scullers. Mm-hmm. And he wrote to me, or he came up to me, I guess, and then he wrote to me and asked me if I would be interested in doing an album with him. And I said, let's talk about it. And he came down here and we visited, and he had a lot of music that he had written, mm-hmm. and it was kind of mixed up. I could understand the feeling in his music, but it was very disconnected, And I said, I have to be fair with you and tell you that I think a lot of the music you've written needs to be corrected or modified some without losing the essence of what your compositional feeling was, And he was very amenable to that. And so I rewrote a lot of his songs, and we did a couple of things together. I did the album the same way that I did with Paul. The only difference is that we recorded with his rhythm section. He had a rhythm section, and we laid down the rhythm tracks for the tunes that we had decided on. And then I took, thanks to Peter Contreras, who was just one of the most wonderful engineers that ever lived, And when I took the tracks out to California, and I assembled my string section out there that I like to use. And so I added strings and French horn and a wonderful guitarist by the name of Joe Lano, who traveled with me, incidentally, with Ann-Margret for a while. Mm-hmm. And he's a wonderful arranger, a great musician. And so I went out to California, recorded the strings, then I brought everything back into Peter Contreras' studio again, and then we went to work on Harry's solos, which needed repairs here and there, mm-hmm. until we refined it. You're talking
about editing the solos?
Yeah, okay. Or correcting or whatever was necessary to bring them up to what I felt was what they should be. Mm-hmm. And so we spent a lot of time with Peter, who was amazing.
You must want to talk about Steve Allen.
Well, that's a
That's a big part of your life.
He's an amazing man, truly amazing. I had done the Steve Allen show with Les Brown. It was a weekly show on ABC on Sundays. And that's how I got to know Steve, and I wound up writing a lot of Steve's songs. I mean, writing them down for him, because he wrote 10 or 15 songs a week. He just was incredibly prolific. And
so you used to score it for him?
Just write the lead sheets for him, because he couldn't read music or any of that. And we had a very close association. And so I was in Vegas with Lena Horne, and I got a telegram from Westinghouse Broadcasting. They were one of the first companies to do syndicated television shows, which the Steve Allen show was. And it said, "You have just been selected the musical director of the new Steve Allen show." So I had to give my notice to Lena Horne. But the other part of it was a problem, too, because I had gotten my bass player friend, Jules Berthaud, who was a really dear friend of mine. I got him the job with Lena. Mm-hmm. And so he put his notice in the next night. And Lena was able to produce some serious profanity from her dressing room. Mm-hmm. I think she was really upset because we both put our notice in, But that's how that happened. I had worked with him in another capacity prior to doing that weekly show, that's every night show with him. That was a great time.
Can you tell us the story of Jenny Smith?
Oh, I can tell you that she was a wonderful singer. I'm still in touch with her. She's a dear, dear friend, and she's a great singer. And she doesn't sing anymore. She's had health problems, and she's just a wonderful singer.
You'd know it if I were in love. I'd show it if I were in love. There wouldn't be any doubt about it if I...
Was he a cut-up all the time? Was he a businessman?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And then when the floor director cued whoever the camera was supposed to go on, it was craziness?
Very often.
It was lunacy?
Very often. I mean, we planned lunacy for him. We used to have dogfights on the street. I mean, we hung 2 World War airplanes up on from cranes and had battles between Louis Nye and Steve. Our opening show for that, the Steve Allen Playhouse on Vine Street in Hollywood, somebody came and took the cap off of a sewer, and Steve and Jane came out of the sewer. That was our opening show.
Who was the director of that show?
There were several directors. One was Darrell Weeks, I think was his name. He was married to a black lady who was a very good friend of Miles Davis. But this lady was a singer, and I don't remember her name. Mm-hmm. But apparently they were very good friends, and as a result of that friendship, Miles used to go over to their house and play with their kids and everything. And there was some rumor that Miles might do the show, and he had never done television before, so we went on a hiatus period, and I went to Hawaii for a week, and I was checking in to the Royal Hawaiian Hotel, and as I was registering at the desk, Milt Hoffman, who was the executive producer, was there, and he saw me, and he came over and said, "Hey, how you doing?" And I said, "Fine." He said, "How would you like to meet Mr. and Mrs. Miles Davis?" And I said, "Fine." And being a man of brevity, I don't like to hang around too long. I went out to where they were sitting in an outdoor coffee shop, was introduced to them, fine, and he was dressed to the nines. He looked like he came off of a magazine cover or something. So the hiatus period was over. We went back to work, and I saw on the bulletin board that Miles Davis was going to be coming on the show. So the day came, and Miles was there, and I walked up to Miles, and I said, "Mr. Davis, I just want you to know how thrilled we are to have you here. I met you a couple of weeks ago in Hawaii. You probably don't remember, but my name is Donn Trenner, and I'm the musical director of the show, and we just want to welcome you." And Miles Davis, the only thing he ever said to me in his life was, "That ain't no big deal." And I never knew how to take that. It sounded very negative to me.
Yeah, as it would.
Until recently I thought about it. And I thought, what could he have possibly meant? And I think maybe what he meant was I was making too much of a fuss over him.
Oh.
Possibly. But that's the only conversation I've ever had with, "That ain't no big deal." That's all he ever said to me. But the the times on the Steve Allen Show were just wonderful. You know?
Out of all the sessions, out of all the groups, is there any one particular session that really says to you, it really happened, it really clicked, it was wonderful, it was exhilarating? Any one session more than any other one come to mind?
Well, my recording has been so diverse, and so many different artists and so many different people. And I enjoyed so many of those sessions. It's really hard for me to pick out anything in particular. Mm-hmm. I can't actually think of anything specifically, because I just enjoyed so many of them, And I did so much recording out there, like I was doing television shows once or twice a week. And because when I first joined Les Brown, which was a long time ago, in 1954, we were doing both the Bob Hope radio shows and the television shows. Mm-hmm. And we did the radio shows from NBC on the corner of Sunset Boulevard and Vine Street. Mm-hmm. That building is non-existent now. But we used to do a weekly show there. Mm-hmm. I mean, where they had sound effects guys that opened the closed doors, Margaret Whiting was on it, and so many good people, Ginger Rogers, I worked a lot with her. I worked with a lot of stars on the Bob Hope Show. Yeah. Dorothy Lamour. I loaned Dorothy Lamour $1 once when we were working in a television situation. And about 2 or 3 months later, she must have gotten my address from someone.
She sent
me the $1 back with a lovely letter.
It was Confederate, though. It wasn't. You were with Ann-Margret how many years?
18.
How did you land a gig like that?
Marvin Hamlish called me one day, and he said, Ann-Margret needs a new musical director, arranger, conductor, and we wonder if you would be interested in it. And I said, well, I'm certainly interested. So he said, well, I'll have the manager call you and we'll talk money or whatever, which I hate to do. I just hate that. But we talked, and I went to the Tropicana and opened a show with her, and I stayed with her for 18 years. Mm. And I love her to pieces. There's no one more magnificent than that lady. And her husband, Roger.
They're just right on all the time.
They're just incredibly thoughtful people. We had we shared a common situation. We're both without siblings. We're both only children, so she is and I am. And I was very close to her mother, who passed away recently, which was very hard for her because she lost her dad too. Mm. But she's probably one of the most thoughtful, gracious ladies I've ever been around in my life. Anybody who was ever ill in the company, she was the first one there to bring them a banana or something because she thinks potassium will help. She's just remarkable. She doesn't work much anymore, but she's doing a show with Andy Williams. Oh. I have a funny Andy Williams story for you.
Lay it on
if you'd like it.
Sure.
There's a wonderful comic impressionist by the name of Bob Anderson, and he lives in Las Vegas. And I've worked with him a lot, and he does great imitations of Andy and Sammy Davis, and and he's wonderful, That all comes from ears. That's what it's about, And one day I got a phone call in California. This is a few years ago, because I've been here. This is my 12th year here. And I answered the phone, and I said, hello. He says, hello, Don. This is Andy Williams. And I said, oh, hi, how are you? And he started to chuckle, and it was Bob Anderson putting me on, right? So we went through the conversation, and that was the end of it. 2 hours later, the telephone rang, and I answered, hello. He says, hello, Don. This is Andy Williams. And it was. I couldn't believe it. And I told Andy about it because he knows Bob Anderson very well. And we both laughed. It was just so funny.
That's funny. Tell us about Shirley MacLaine. Did you ever record with Shirley?
Yes.
You did?
Well, it brings back the memory of a very, very important, strange night. Shirley MacLaine had been discovered on Broadway. And it was 20 years since she had been back on Broadway. And we opened at the Palace Theater with a full orchestra, and RCA did a live recording of the event. And so there were microphones all over the stage. Now, at that time, Quinlan, it was a girl that was on a life support system, and they were discussing whether they should pull the plug and let her die or not. Karen Quinlan, I'm quite sure. Shirley was going with her boyfriend was Pete Hamill, who's a very important writer. You know, he wrote for New York Times and written several books. And I think he gave Shirley a line that she must have messed up somehow, because at that time New York had gone almost into full bankruptcy. And anyhow, the night that we opened there was, I mean, you could just feel the electricity in the air. Of course, they were probably all invited guests, and I had this huge orchestra on stage. And Shirley comes running out on stage, and the applause was deafening, and it didn't seem like it was going to stop, you know. And she was standing there, and I could see she was just so excited. And she said, "You must remember," she said, "this is my first time back in New York, and I'm thrilled to be here." But she said, "I just want you to know, you can't get New York down. New York is like the Karen Quinlan of cities." Well, she had to apologize to the press. We went to London after that, to the London Palladium. She had to do all kinds of interviews and apologize for that, because that was not the right thing to say. And she must have mixed up the line that Pete gave her somehow. There's an album out of that performance.
How long did you tour with her?
Several years.
Yeah.
A lot of international stuff with her.
You spent a lot of time in Europe.
Yes.
And you did some recording with Stan Getz.
Yes.
And Jerry Mulligan.
Yes.
On Finnish TV. Swedish. Tell us about your stay over there in Europe.
Well, that all started as a result of Nancy Wilson doing television shows over there. And one of my very dear friends, Leonard Vetterholm, who is a television producer, called me one day and he said, "We wonder if you would be interested in co-hosting Sweden's first jazz festival." And I said, "Of course, I'm very honored." And he said, "Your co-host would be Gunilla Marcus." I saw her work with Johnny Dankworth and his wife Cleo Lane. My friend Leonard I was in the booth with him while he was doing that show. So I agreed to do it, and I went over there and did 40 hours of television. Dizzy was on it, and I mean, just everybody, you know, and Toots Thielman was on it, genius. And so I did a lot of work in Sweden. I did a lot of things there.
And you lived there for a while.
Well, I spent a lot of time there. I didn't actually live there, but I did this wonderful Swedish Jazz Festival. It was great.
One last question, and I guess this is it, right? Were you at any time known as Donna Trenner, jazz tenor for Ina Ray Hutton?
No.
Oh, I guess that's that.
I never heard anything like that before in my life. No.
You know who Ina Ray Hutton is.
Yeah, but I wasn't ever a girl. Not that I know of.
Mr. Don Trenner, thank you. Thank you very much for spending the time and talking to us.
Thank you for being so considerate and feeling so strongly about me. That's very impressive, and I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks again, man. Research and interview by me, Harry Platcow. Recorded, edited, and produced by Mr. Sonny Dufo. Thank you for listening.